The city was alive with the usual hustle and bustle. People rushing to their meetings, tourists snapping pictures, and street vendors calling out to passing crowds. But amidst the flurry of activity, no one paid attention to the man sitting on the cold sidewalk. His clothes were torn, his face hidden under a worn-out cap, and his hands were shaking as he held a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." No one knew his name. No one cared. He was just another homeless man blending into the city's sea of faces. But there was something different about him, a quiet presence, as if he was observing more than he was letting on. His eyes scanned the crowd, and the faintest of smiles crossed his lips. Nearby, a group of people walked by, some tossing coins in his cup, others looking away. But then one woman stopped in front of him. She frowned at the old, tattered clothes he wore, her expression one of disgust. "Get a job, you lazy bum," she muttered before walking off. The man didn't react. Instead, he pulled his coat tighter around himself and adjusted his cap, hiding his identity further. He had a plan, and today would be the day it all came together. No one knew the truth, that the man sitting on the street, the one they so easily ignored, was one of the richest men in the world, a billionaire who owned half the buildings in the city. His name was Nathan Westbrook, and he had come up with an idea that would change everything. For weeks, Nathan had disguised himself as a homeless man, watching how people treated those without wealth. He had been appalled by the harshness, the dismissiveness. But today was the day he would show them all what true power looked like, and it wasn't what they thought. As the sun began to set, the chill of the evening air grew colder. Nathan remained on the street, unmoved by the passing crowds. People walked by, some glancing at him with pity, others with judgment. But Nathan's eyes were fixed on one particular figure, a young man in a sleek suit, carrying a briefcase. The young man walked with purpose, head high, not even glancing at Nathan. But just as he was about to pass, he dropped a crumpled $20 bill into Nathan's cup. "Here, maybe this will help you get a meal," the man said with a sneer. Nathan's eyes followed him as he walked away, and an idea formed in his mind. He stood up slowly, his back aching from sitting on the cold concrete all day. As he adjusted his coat, he noticed a woman nearby walking into a high-end restaurant. The gold sign on the door read, "Le Grand Bistro," one of the most expensive dining spots in the city. The door was about to close, but Nathan quickly crossed the street and stood in front of it, blocking the entrance. The hostess looked at him with a raised eyebrow. "Sir, can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but laced with impatience. Nathan didn't say a word. Instead, he walked past her, his head held high now, and entered the restaurant without a glance back. The hostess blinked in shock, but before she could react, Nathan was already making his way through the pristine dining room. The patrons at the tables paused, staring at him in confusion. He ignored them all, his step steady and confident as he approached the bar. The bartender, a young man with a bored expression, looked up. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, clearly skeptical. "I'll have your finest wine," Nathan replied, his voice calm, yet carrying an undeniable authority. The bartender hesitated, but seeing Nathan's unshakable confidence, he turned to pour the wine. The whispers in the room grew louder as people began to realize something was off. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as Nathan sat at the bar, sipping his wine. The staff and patrons continued to stare, unable to comprehend what was happening. A homeless man, dressed in filthy clothes, smelling of the street, was sitting in the upscale restaurant like he belonged there. Minutes later, the manager, a middle-aged man in a suit, walked over with an air of authority. "Excuse me, sir," he said, trying to keep his voice polite. "I'm afraid this is a private establishment. You can't just walk in here like that." Nathan looked up at him slowly, his eyes gleaming with a cold, calculating edge. "Is that so?" he replied, his voice deep and unbothered. Perhaps you should take a look at the receipt for the wine I've ordered. The manager blinked in surprise as Nathan placed the bill on the bar. It was a receipt for the finest wine in the restaurant, one that cost more than some people made in a month. The manager hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Sir, I'm sorry for the confusion. Please, enjoy your evening." As the manager turned to leave, Nathan's eyes followed him, a small smile creeping onto his face. The power was in his hands now. He had gained control of the situation, proving that wealth and status could not dictate respect. The room remained quiet, but Nathan could feel the shifting of dynamics. The rich and powerful were beginning to feel uncomfortable with the uncertainty he had introduced, and the tables were turning. But just as Nathan was about to sit back and enjoy his victory, the door swung open once more, and a familiar face entered the room, the young man who had given him $20 earlier. The young man walked toward the bar, his eyes immediately locking onto Nathan. He stopped just a few feet away, his expression one of disbelief. "Wait," he said, his voice rising. "Is that the same homeless man I gave money to?" The bartender nodded hesitantly. "He's been here for a while, sir, and he's been treated like any other customer." The young man, his face flushed with confusion and anger, took a step toward Nathan. "What kind of joke is this? Are you mocking me? Or is this some kind of game?" Nathan turned slowly to face him, his gaze unwavering. "Do you really think people like you can dictate who belongs where?" The young man faltered, then scoffed. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Nathan smiled, his eyes now locked with the young man's. "I'm the one who owns this building, and the next time you look down on someone based on their appearance, you might want to remember that appearances can be deceiving." The young man's jaw dropped as realization hit him. "Wait, you're the owner of this building?" Nathan didn't respond, his expression unchanged. But his silence was enough. The truth was evident. The room was silent, the weight of Nathan's words hanging heavily in the air. The young man's face turned crimson, and he quickly stepped back, realizing the extent of his mistake. He stammered, trying to apologize, but the words wouldn't come out. Nathan stood up slowly, his gaze sweeping over the entire room. "You see, power doesn't come from wealth alone. It's how you treat others, no matter who they are, that defines you." He turned toward the door, but before he left, he glanced back at the young man. "You'll learn that someday. I suggest you start now." The young man stood frozen, humiliated and speechless. As Nathan walked out of the restaurant, the staff and customers slowly began to murmur among themselves. By the time he reached the street, Nathan knew his point had been made. People were starting to think differently about what truly mattered. And as for the young man, he would remember this lesson for the rest of his life.